It looks that way, but we're really not sure right now. In case you've been wondering, right now that we know that 90,000 troops are now in Iraq, 75,000 of those troops, United States troops.
I think it is a positive step. I think it ties in with the main aim and the objective of the coalition, which is to encourage Iraqis to basically take over. I would be in favor of this rather than a military administration. We are Iraqis who are brought up in Iraq and lived in the West as well. And together with Iraqis inside, we can help redevelop and reconstruct Iraq based on democratic principle and have real civil society.
And well, that is the question, I suppose. How much involvement will Iraqis who are still in the country, who are still in Baghdad and elsewhere throughout the country, and perhaps who are part of this regime? I mean, we've heard a lot from U.S. administration officials saying that, you know, there is an Iraqi civil bureaucracy that could perhaps be utilized in a post-Saddam Hussein regime. Is that going to be a difficult dance, figuring out who is compromised by the past regime and who has not been?
It is not difficult. Obviously, we are not here to throw everything away and restart all over again. We have to work with the existing networks. What we need to do is we need to train and we need to develop people and we need to raise the awareness of what new civil society means and what democratic freedoms have to be there. So obviously there's going to be a lot of work with the existing network, with civil servants and the second and third tier, and that's where the Iraqi reconstruction group is working. It's not working only on ministerial level, but it's on the second and third tier, which are vital in getting things to run smoothly. What we have is we've got the best of both worlds. We are Iraqis who born and brought up in Iraq for part of our life, and we spend a considerable amount in the West. So we are there to encourage and establish links between Iraqi government and industry with the West, as well as encourage companies in the West to help in the reconstruction and rebuilding effort in Iraq.
I wanted to get to the role that you think the UN should play in all this, but before we do, I just want to ask one more question about this bureaucracy, the civil bureaucracy, as you said, the second and third tier. To what degree is it infused or fused together with Ba'ath Party? I mean, I simply do not know the answer to this, which is why I'm asking. Are Ba'ath Party officials part and parcel of the civil bureaucracy?
Well, that varies because, I mean, there was a period of time when everybody was forced to join the Ba'ath Party to gain entry into university. So there are people who've been forced to enter the Ba'ath Party, and there are staunch sort of followers of the Ba'ath regime. So we have to distinguish. The majority of people have been forced to join the Ba'ath Party, and they're okay. But there are a handful who sort of see their interest and future lies with Saddam Hussein, and they would go down with a drowned man, basically. So I think there are there, but because the fear and atrocities committed, you know, that sort of does not encourage them to come forward. But once there is change, you will see different Iraqis in those positions.
Just very, very briefly, what sort of role do you see for the UN? Do you think the UN should run Iraq basically in the short term?
The UN can be a bureaucracy and a quangle, but I mean, what we can do, and I think what we ought to do, the Iraqis got to have a leading role right now. We can act as, can manage the process, and we can work with the UN and with the coalition and with our allies and friends, but not sort of superimpose. You know, you can't superimpose something on the will of the people.
And as you say, may not be necessary because of this civil bureaucracy which is in place, and perhaps the infrastructure which will remain after this war. Saeed al-Sahaf, appreciate you joining us very much. It was interesting to hear your perspective. Saeed al-Sarraf.
You're welcome.
Darren? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought Darren was available. We're actually going to go to break. We'll be back in a moment.
You know their music. Now you can own their story. The Beatles Anthology, now available on DVD. Completely remastered in 5.1 surround sound. 5 DVD discs featuring rare or previously unseen footage of the Beatles' first recording sessions in 25 years. Order the Beatles Anthology now and receive a free limited edition poster. Their music, their story. To order the Beatles Anthology 5 DVD box set and receive your free poster, call the number on your screen. 3 easy payments of $26.98 plus $5.95 shipping and handling. Rush delivery available. Call now.
Introducing New America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
AOL's new parental controls I can set up for each one of my children.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
America Online has so much more.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
Welcome back. In about 6 minutes or so, we are anticipating a briefing from the Hilton Hotel in Kuwait City. Colonel Chris Vernon, the British military spokesman, is supposed to give that briefing. That's going to be around 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Significant because there is a lot we would like to know about what is going on in Basra right now, which is where the British have basically ringed the city. There was a report from CENTCOM early on Saturday that U.S. aircraft attacked and destroyed a building. It was a 2-story building where it's believed some 200 of these Iraqi irregular fighters were inside meeting. Precision-guided missiles went inside the building on a delayed fuse. They actually entered the building and then exploded from the inside. So, according to CENTCOM, very little damage to surrounding buildings to a nearby Catholic church. But apparently that building was destroyed. We're hoping to hear something about that from this briefing that should take place, as we said, in about 5 minutes from now. Before we get to that, though, I just want to move on to this story by Candy Crowley. I don't know if you saw it earlier in the day, but it is a very moving piece of work. In the heat of battle, time can literally stand still. We have heard that from so many Marines and soldiers in this conflict. Or some say the time passes in a flash. Our Candy Crowley says, for combat veterans, the aftermath of war often lasts a lifetime.
They are, we are told, well-trained.
This is a messy business. There's nothing very pretty about the training that you take to prepare you for combat, because it is to kill people.
In the spring of 1970, a squad of U.S. soldiers spotted a small unit of Viet Cong it had been circling for days. Staff Sergeant Tom Ridge opened fire. A Viet Cong soldier dropped dead. Did you at the time, or have you since, looked back and pondered on killing someone?
Mm-hmm.
And what's that like?
That's one of those introspective times where it's just, it's just an introspective time, not a public time.
Duke Cunningham was a Vietnam fighter ace, shooting down 5 enemy planes. After his first, he returned to a ship deck full of sailors and crew, cheering, shaking his hand, pushing in to slap his back.
And one of the guys looked at me and says, Duke, what's it like to kill somebody? And all of a sudden, bang, it just hit me head. You don't think about those things. And it's removed, it's far off, it's not in close. And I went to the priest because it bothered me. I knew I could do it again, but I didn't know it was going to bother me as much as it did. And it still does.
Of all the wounds time does not heal, the ones that fester deep in the soul are the wounds you inflict.
It's not something that civilized people do. You don't. I mean, it's just not. It's not a matter of being tormented, but troubled, in the sense that that's not what we do unless we're called upon to do it under the most extreme set of circumstances.
War may sometimes be a necessary thing, but it can never be a natural thing. Training bridges that gap. Sergeant Chuck Hagel was seriously wounded twice in Vietnam.
You are trained to kill people, because the alternative is, if you are in combat, you will be killed. So your choices are not varied. It's very simple. And so you do what you're trained to do. You do what you're there to do. And in Vietnam, it was body count.
Training is what keeps you running toward the front while trucks loaded with dead bodies pass you going the other way.
It's hard to explain what training can do. Training sets your mind to respond, not to common sense and judgment, but to training. You really don't have time to think, I'm going the wrong way. I should be going the other way.
Later, when he was wounded and trapped behind enemy lines in Korea, Staff Sergeant Charlie Rangel led 40 men fighting their way to safety. He won a Bronze Star.
If you're killing people, it's out of fear, not really, in my opinion, out of bravery. Nobody's looking for medals. Everyone wants to live another day.
Do not misunderstand. Rangel, Cunningham, Ridge, and Hagel are all proud, decorated combat veterans. It's just that decades later, killing still troubles the soul. Maybe that's a good thing. Did you do it again?
I did. I shot down 4 more MiGs. And I often told myself, I said that if I ever get used to this, I shouldn't be here.
Candy Crowley, CNN, Washington.
Because things are every 15 minutes. Trust CNN Headline News to give you up-to-the-minute reports from Iraq, on screen and on the ticker. Breaking news from the front lines every 15 minutes. Depend on CNN Headline News. It's everything you need to know.
CNN Headline News, 24/7.
30 years, more than 4,000 shows featuring more than 23,000 guests. This was The Tonight Show, starring the king of late night, Johnny Carson. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, The Tonight Show was America's late night party. And the talk show everyone was always talking about. This is the Johnny Carson Collection, a 3-tape trip back in time featuring Johnny's favorite moments from The Tonight Show. Call now during this special television offer, and we'll even include a 4th video, The Final Show, America Says Farewell from 1992. This remarkable 4-volume collection can be yours for just $49.99 plus shipping and handling. Order now and receive the bonus video, Wild About Animals, at no extra charge. That's almost 5 hours of classic memories on 5 great videos.
To order, call 1-800-306-5500. That's 1-800-306-5500. The Johnny Carson Collection on VHS or DVD. The choice is yours. Call now, 1-800-306-5500. 1-800-306-5500.
This is CNN.
The most trusted name in news.
I'm Darren Kagan, live in Kuwait City. Let's take a look at what is happening at this hour. Beginning with smoke billowing over the Kuwaiti skies after an Iraqi missile attack. A Chinese-made seersucker missile struck a popular shopping mall in Kuwait City overnight. One person was hurt. This is the first time the city has been hit since the war began. Meanwhile, in Baghdad, there were also overnight explosions there. The Iraqi Information Ministry building was struck by a huge blast as that city came under coalition air attacks for the 8th straight night. In the latest attempt to secure the southern city of Nasiriyah, U.S. Marines today launched a daybreak attack against Iraqi resistance. Reports from the scene indicate a number of Iraqi tanks have been destroyed. One U.S. colonel says that Marines are very close to controlling Nasiriyah. About 2,000 additional Marines have arrived into Kuwait to assist in the war against Iraq. The Marines are from the 24th Expeditionary Unit. Military officials say that unit has the ability to rapidly organize for combat operations in virtually any environment. The latest figures from the war show 52 coalition service members have been killed in action since the start of the war on Iraq. 29 of them are Americans, 21 U.S. troops are missing, and 7 Americans are prisoners of war in Iraq. As for the wounded, 4 U.S. soldiers with battle injuries are now at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington. A hospital spokesman says the soldiers are in fair to satisfactory condition. Before they came to the U.S., they received medical care at a hospital in Germany. Let's check out some other news this hour, including the 6-hour hijacking of a Turkish Airlines plane. It ended peacefully with help from Turkey's prime minister. More than 200 people on board that flight was diverted to Greece. The suspect freed the passengers after talking on the phone with Turkish officials. We have a lot of war coverage for you this morning. Coming up this hour, some say that President Bush has underestimated the resolve of Iraqi troops. Others say that's simply not the case. We're going to look at that debate coming up. Plus, politicians of today talk about what they faced on the battlefields of history. They share the emotions of having a license to kill. Plus, a warm moment, love and war. A Marine talks from his heart to his pregnant wife back home. You'll want some tissues ready for that one. A lot ahead. Here's Anderson.
Darren, thanks very much. It is a little past 4 a.m. here on the east coast of the United States, a little past noon Saturday in Baghdad. You are looking at a picture right there. The Information Ministry hit several hours ago. From CNN's global headquarters in Atlanta, I'm Anderson Cooper. Good morning.
And I'm live in Kuwait City. I'm Darren Kagan. It's just past 12 noon here in the Persian Gulf. We are standing by waiting for a British military briefing to begin. Colonel Chris Vernon will do that from right here in Kuwait City. When it starts, you'll see it live here on CNN.
Well, let's get a look at the map. We want to just step back at an overview of where things are at this point, show you where some of the hotspots are right now in Iraq. Starting in the north, U.S. troops are setting up shop at the Harir airfield that is in Kurdish-controlled territory. They are bringing in tanks and other tools of war. Moving to southern Iraq and Nasiriyah, as Darren was mentioning just a few moments ago, that is where the U.S. Marines have launched a new attack we just told you about. Art Harris will probably check in with us a little bit later on in this hour. And in the south, in Basra, Central Command says U.S. airstrikes have hit a building full of an estimated 200 Iraqi militiamen. We are waiting for some sort of damage assessment. There are also reports of landmines and booby traps in Basra as well as in Qasar. Let's go back to our post in Kuwait City and our own Darren Kagan.
Thank you very much, Anderson. It has been a busy time here. Let's go back to 1:40 a.m. local time, coming up on about 11 hours from when that happened. A missile, an Iraqi missile, hit here in Kuwait City. This is the 13th missile the Iraqis have fired at Kuwait. The significance of this is the first one to hit a busy part of what potentially could have been a busy part of the city. It hit an area called the Shark Mall, one of the central shopping areas of Kuwait City. Looks a lot like an American mall with a big supermarket attached. Hit just along the C area where this mall is, and skidded into the mall area, did some damage to the mall. Of course, at 1:40 a.m. In the morning, not a lot of people there, not a lot of people shopping, so only 1 or 2 people were injured in this. The significance, 1, the number of missiles that have been launched to the city and none have hit. This one finally hit. And 2, no sirens were sounded while this missile was incoming. That's the first time we've known that to be happening. So we'll continue to follow that progress here in Kuwait City. Right now, we want to check on a bombing that took place in Baghdad. And for more on that, Reem Brahimi is joining us from Amman, Jordan. Reem.
Darren, hospital sources I spoke to just an hour ago say something between 47 and 57 people were killed in that bombing in a marketplace, a very popular marketplace in Baghdad. Ministry of Information figures put the number of dead at 58. The hospital sources say that there's bound to be rising death toll, a lot of wounded. It happened at 6 p.m. in a very, very popular area northwest of Baghdad at the time when people are really, it's the time that people really go shopping. It's sort of rush hour even in Baghdad. And it happened also, the marketplace is actually near a hospital where doctors were already treating the wounded from a previous bombing that killed 14 or 15 people in...
Reem, I'm sorry. Reem, I'm sorry, I have to go ahead and interrupt you because our British military briefing beginning right now in Kuwait City. Here's Colonel Chris Vernon with the British military. Let's listen in.
Future. When we planned this operation, the British divisional commander identified 5 critical elements in our probable area of operations, upon which we needed to have an effect. They were Iraq's regular army, irregular forces working against the coalition, oil field infrastructure, Qasr, and Basra. Those were the 5 critical elements we identified in our planning phase. We could not predict the condition nor intent of these critical elements at some future point in time when we would be employed to create that required effect. We therefore had to focus on how we would employ our resources and forces to achieve the desired effect against a broad range of circumstances, hostile through to benign. The purpose of this was to create a flexibility of mind and approach that would stand us in good stead in any event or eventuality. As things have transpired, this approach has been validated, and the effects on and the intents of the 5 critical elements have varied considerably. Iraq's armed forces were offered the opportunity to capitulate early, without a fight. They declined, and thus required a hard, kinetic, destructive effect to be brought upon them. Their intent showed little desire or capability to fight. Irregular forces have shown a determination to resist, but slowly are being eroded. Our experience of counter-insurgency operations gained over several decades will guarantee success. Oil infrastructure was not destroyed, ineptly defended, and seized intact with consummate ease. Qasr needed to be secured in working order to facilitate the future importation of humanitarian aid. This was achieved with kinetic force, but still preserving a working operational port. Our effect on Basra must be to convince the people to have the confidence to rise against the oppressive political control of the Ba'ath Party and the irregulars who do its bidding. Thus, targeting and eradication of the Ba'ath Party is now the critical effect we need to achieve, and the British military's main effort. I repeat that. The targeting and eradication of the Ba'ath Party within the Basra province is now our primary focus and our military main effort. Our seizing of a senior Ba'athist official has rocked their confidence and provided an excellent insight into that mire. And both their headquarters in Al-Zubair and Basra no longer exist. Our ability to enter Al-Zubair and Basra at will to achieve this desired effect with hard-hitting armoured and armoured infantry combined forces will continue as we determine. Control of the people lessens day by day, necessitating desperate measures to retain it. Delinking the people from the state-controlled radio and TV from Baghdad further lessens Ba'athist grip. Slowly but inexorably, the wedge between the people and the oppressors runs deeper, with the inevitable end state of removal of oppression and control of the people of Basra and its surrounding province. Very happy to take questions on where the British stand within the Basra province.
Have you personally been surprised by the level of resistance you seem to be encountering from Iraqi people?
Well, as I said in my statement there, I said that we fully expected irregular forces, and my embedded journalists at the division headquarters have been given sight of some of the British planning dated early February, where that was firmly in our likely scenario. So not surprised that they existed. They have fought with a degree of resistance. We didn't know how hard they would fight or whether they would capitulate, but I think to give credit where it is due, if one has to in this case, yes, they have fought pretty well. They are few in number, and slowly but surely we are applying pressure on them where they are reducing hugely in influence.
I was thinking actually more about members of the Iraqi public who do not, in certain areas anyway, appear to be sort of rolling over in the way that at least some commentators...
The people.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, I come from up there. There are the Ba'ath Party, there are its irregulars, and there's quite a big gap between the people of Basra. The Shia people of Basra were brutally put down after the Gulf War when they rose up. There is a huge amount of fear and indeed degree of lack of confidence that we are yet at the stage where there is an inevitability to this, that inevitability being that Saddam Hussein will go. And that is, while we are eradicating and targeting the Ba'ath regime, the other side to our strategy is we've got to win increasingly the confidence of these people, hence humanitarian aid, hence talking to them in a low-level manner in the rear areas. British soldiers are now patrolling in ways they have done in Borneo, in Malaya, in Cyprus.
You were looking at a live picture from Al Arabia where they are saying on this TV that that is part of a missile that has been discovered. We continue now with our press conference by Chris Vernon, Colonel Chris Vernon, the British military spokesman.
Yeah.
How many people have been interned, and what is the difference between internment and POW status in the way that you treat people? I mean, Ba'ath Party people that you smashed, for example.
We view him as a combatant. We view any Ba'ath Party official who is controlling irregular military forces as a combatant.
But does that mean that he's a POW?
I'm not saying that. We view him as a combatant.
But how, sorry, what I want to know is how they are treated, what legal...
I'm not telling you what we're doing with him. Clearly, he's a very useful source of intelligence to us, and he's talking very freely. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I'm not here to talk in absolute detail. I'm the British divisional spokesman. That's the level you're getting. I'm representing the Major General commanding the British division, not the 1st Battalion, the Black Watch, who are in our division. Yesterday, we have got troops on the west of Basra, a couple of battle groups. Yesterday, they rotate. It was the Black Watch initially observed. We're on the bridges, basically, on the waterway there. People, initial reports 1,000, gaining up to 2,000, coming out of Basra towards us. They were engaged by small arms fire from the outskirts of Basra. It's pretty rubbly. It looks like, it's not like Kuwait at all. The outskirts are very decrepit and dilapidated. From what we could see, and this is people sitting in warriors and tanks at some distance, but with pretty good actor optics, they were firing into their own people. The people panicked and ran back into the town. We can't validate it any more than being observed. We tried to engage the positions they were coming from, but it was pretty difficult because clearly they were operating from windows, from doors in urban areas. Yeah, and there was another, about the battle group in the south, I think it was the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards, observed a similar occasion on further south. They've got one of the other bridges. I haven't got the exact location of which battle group's on which bridge. Yeah.
Last time you spoke to us, you said that Basra was not a legitimate military target, and that you would like to avoid urban warfare as a command. How much is that altered? Because having some forces taking out Ba'ath Party, does that mean you now engage in urban warfare, and how does that complicate your operation?
No, we've got to be careful at any stage to avoid collateral damage, both to the buildings of Basra and to the people. To do otherwise would totally go against our aim, our secondary or tertiary aim of building the confidence up there. Therefore, this morning, the Black Watch mounted an operation into the centre of Basra with tanks and infantry in armoured personnel vehicles, warriors. They drove in and destroyed 2 statues. I haven't got the detail, and I'm not sure if they're the ones of Saddam Hussein, in, out, and back again. The purpose of that is psychological, to show the people, on the one hand, he does not wield influence, and when we wish, we will strike at any representative token of that eroding influence. It also, I should imagine, has sent quite a shock to the Ba'athist and irregular organisations in Basra that the British, with a degree of impunity, can just go in at will and achieve that desired effect.
So, become a military target now?
how you define military target. I mean, warfare is asymmetrical, and people have got to understand that. If we are using certain military tactics to achieve our overall psychological and physical end state of the eradication of the Ba'athist regime. Yeah.
If you can move into Basra at will, then why aren't you moving substantial numbers of men into the city to take control of it?
Well, Commander 7 Brigade has got 27 years of military experience, a military cross from Bosnia, and I think his judgment is the one that has to be left to make the decisions as to how he...
We are breaking into this press conference that is happening in Kuwait City for this, which just passed on the Associated Press wire. According to the Associated Press, a suicide bomber kills 5 Americans in an attack in Najaf. This Associated Press is quoting a U.S. military officer. This is all we have this time. Again, a suicide bomber, according to the Associated Press, quoting a U.S. military officer, says a suicide bomber kills 5 Americans in an attack in Najaf. We'll have more on this shortly. Let's go back to the press conference in Kuwait City.
At that operational level of what's happening there, the Americans are with us, no pause, no rush. We just conducted an operation that left at 5:30 this morning, that went into Basra and achieved what I just told you. Yeah, so.
You made it possible that the people of Basra won't be confident enough in you until Baghdad collapses.
That's a possible scenario. As I say, we plan left, we plan right. I mean, ideally, clearly, we would wish, I'm sure, to achieve Basra before Baghdad, if possible, because that increases the psychological pressure on Baghdad. I can't say that will be the case. That would be our desired end state. Yeah,
You assert quite confidently that the control of the Ba'ath Party over the people lessens day by day. How do you know that? And can you offer us any concrete evidence that that's the case?
Well, certainly in Safwan, the village to the rear, our soldiers are talking to the locals. That is clear. In Al-Zubar, we now have a foothold in Al-Zubar. We were in and out of Al-Zubar initially, in, out, hit, in, out, hold. We have a foothold in there, and we're actually getting aid distribution points into there. Al-Zubar is day by day increasingly more benign. There are British soldiers in there. They are talking to the locals in Al-Zubar, which is probably a better litmus test than Safwan, much further to the border. And every indication is that the confidence grows slowly, but the fear that this may still not be the absolute, that they may still come back again, as happened in '91, still weighs very, very heavily on their minds. But when I'm talking about what I'm talking, this is British soldiers feeding up the G2 chain, talking to residents in Al-Zubar and Safwan. Clearly, Basra are far less, we can comment, the British Army, far less confidently about the mood in Basra.
No.
Sorry,
There's a report that 4 or 5 British soldiers have gone missing or been abducted outside Basra on Friday night. Do you have anything on that? And secondly, with Basra, you're saying that there's no rush, but you're seeing hundreds, thousands even, people fleeing the city yesterday. There's talk that there's a humanitarian crisis impending there. Surely there is a rush to sort that situation out.
Okay, 2 questions. Firstly, I have no reports, and I was in the British Divisional Headquarters this morning, up till 7 o'clock local. Wrong, up until 9 o'clock local, of any missing British soldiers around Basra. To your second question, what is the humanitarian situation in Basra? They've never been living in any great degree of decent living conditions or standards. In fact, we all knew that. Anyone that's been into Iraq knows full well that the south has been a pretty poor relation to the north. The water is on, working at about 40% capacity. Not ideal. They had food stocks when we started this up to a month and probably more. The medical situation is rudimentary but operating. Therefore, the humanitarian crisis that is being described in some areas is not, we would say, yet evident there. That said, we would still wish to improve their living conditions as soon as we possibly can. Does that answer the point? That's from our perspective. Of course, I go one further though. Of course, the other angle to any humanitarian crisis is oppression of people, mentally, psychologically. We haven't sieged Basra. The bridges to the north are open. People can go freely in and out. The bridges that we hold are open. They can go freely in and out if They won't, as we saw yesterday, the Ba'ath Party and the irregulars let them.
General Franks last weekend was saying that you're hoping for a peaceful surrender of Basra. The fact that you've come up against this resistance, does that mean that you have misunderestimated the levels of resistance? And I think you yourself were saying last weekend that you didn't believe that there was a substantial military force within Basra.
I'll take you back to my opening statement when I told you that the British planning envisaged on the 5 critical elements, one of Basra, scenarios from hostile to benign. Clearly, our best case scenario would have been the absolute benign one, whereby we were now in Basra. It has not happened. They've pulled back their regular forces into there, although a lot of them, I was around the west of Basra yesterday. There are remnants of T-50, not remnants, actually tanks that have just been abandoned sitting in the field, which is encouraging. We've also destroyed a considerable number of Iraqi regular forces who, in and around Basra, the Black Watch, when they went in this morning on the approach in, took out 5 T-55s, and in an action about 2 days ago, where the Iraqi regular army came south out of Basra onto the Al-Faw Peninsula, we had intelligence to guess to that. We put a squadron of 14 Challenger tanks over a bridge down to the south. They hit them on a meeting engagement, and within 20 minutes, the 14 Iraqi tanks were destroyed, and the accompanying 2 companies of infantry were destroyed equally.
Have you got any figures for the amount of prisoners of war taken in and around Basra, and secondly, the amount of Iraqi casualties, military casualties?
No, we don't count casualties. Your concept of war is totally misplaced if you think a British soldier counts every time he kills somebody. That's point one, and I want to make that
We are going to break out of this press conference right now. As we reported just a moment ago, according to the Associated Press, suicide bomber kills 5 Americans in an attack in Najaf. Tom Mantier is standing by at CENTCOM headquarters in Doha, Qatar with the latest. Tom, what do you know?
Well, Anderson's CENTCOM has confirmed the incident that a car bomb, a apparent suicide car bomb at a military checkpoint in the 3rd Infantry Division near the southern city of Najaf was detonated early this morning. They do confirm that there were casualties from the explosion. They say there were 2 people in the car. Will not say how many were killed or injured surrounding this checkpoint, but apparently a car laden with explosives pulled up to the checkpoint and was detonated. Now this marks the first time that we've seen this type of action, true guerrilla-style tactics that we have seen elsewhere in the Middle East, where car bombings are frequent. But as far as this type of activity in the current conflict in Iraq, having a car bomb pull up and be detonated at a military checkpoint, it is indeed the first time we've seen that. But CENTCOM is confirming the incident took place. Initially, about an hour ago, they said they'd heard of it, and now they're confirming that there has been a car bombing at a military checkpoint in the southernmost city of Najaf.
Tom, I'm not sure if CENTCOM made any sort of statement on this, but if they did, have they characterized what the level of activity, what the level of fighting is in Najaf at this moment?
No, they haven't. It will be a question that probably in 2.5 hours that will be raised at this briefing. You know, there has been this talk of a pause or whatever you want to call it in the campaign to rearm, regroup, and resupply. But all indications on the ground that we've been hearing is that is simply not taking place as you could recognize it outwardly. We talked to the British spokesman in the last hour or so, and he said that yes, there is rearming and resupplying going on, but the campaign continues as well.
All right, Tom Mantier, in that press conference, as you mentioned, is in about 2.5 hours from now, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. CNN will bring that to you live. Tom, thanks very much. A conflict that has seen white flags used as cover, that has seen civilians used as shields, that has seen hospitals and schools used as headquarters for irregular forces, has apparently now seen a suicide bombing. We're going to go to my colleague Darren Kagan, who is live in Kuwait City. Darren, it's tough to hear.
Anderson, as we get more on that news out of what is happening out of Najaf, I want to show you pictures we're getting out of Germany, out of Ramstein airbase. This is where more injured soldiers, more U.S. soldiers are arriving for treatment. This is one of the largest hospitals in all of Europe, and this is the natural flow of where they go for treatment, first to the field and then to Ramstein. This on a day also we're getting word that the first injured soldiers making their way back to the U.S. to Walter Reed Medical Center in Washington, D.C. As I understand it, the pictures show a couple of planes One plane carrying some servicemen and the other as well. In the past couple of days when we've seen servicemen come off of these planes, we've seen two ways. Some are able, if they are able, they walk off on their own, sometimes with some help, sometimes with some crutches, and then the more severe wounded taken off on stretchers. But they are at the place where they will get the best medical care at this point. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back after this.
Several hundred septic system repairs a year. If your septic system fails, you're going to run into several problems. It will either back up into the yard, into the house. I would recommend you use RIX once a month. It is cheaper to maintain your septic system, a lot cheaper.
What about Paris?
Why not the Caribbean? How can planning your next trip be even better?
Mexico?
Knowing your trip could be free.
Hawaii! Yeah!
Call now to request the City Advantage World MasterCard, and you can earn free award travel plus get 8,000 bonus miles. And you can use your miles to fly on over 25 top airlines. You'll earn 1 mile for every dollar you spend on everyday purchases and on special purchases too. Call to request your card and 8,000 bonus miles. Plus, now your miles never expire as long as you make a purchase with your card at least once every 3 years. Soon, you'll be on the trip you plan. Use your miles to fly on over 25 top airlines, stay at the finest hotels worldwide, and drive with any major car rental company free. Call now to request your City Advantage World MasterCard and 8,000 bonus miles, and your next trip to almost anywhere could be free.
Introducing new America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
AOL's new parental controls I can set up for each one of my children.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google. The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
America Online has so much more.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
Let's take a look at some of the headlines happening at this hour, beginning with authorities in Kuwait who say that missile that rocked Kuwait City was a Chinese-made seersucker missile. It struck a popular shopping mall overnight, injuring one person. It's the first time the city has been hit since the war began. Baghdad has been pounded for the 8th night in a row. The Iraqi Information Ministry building was struck by a huge blast overnight. Meanwhile, Iraqi hospital officials say 52 civilians were killed in an airstrike on a residential neighborhood earlier in the day. The U.S. says that strike cannot be confirmed until a battle assessment is completed. In southern Iraq, U.S. Marines launched a daybreak attack against Iraqi resistance in the city of Nasiriyah. Marines in the area have been conducting search and destroy missions in an ongoing effort to secure that city. About 2,000 more Marines have arrived in Kuwait to support U.S. forces already in Iraq. The Marines are from the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Officials say the unit has the ability to rapidly organize for combat operations in almost any environment. According to the latest figures compiled by CNN, 52 coalition service members have died in Operation Iraqi Freedom, 21 are unaccounted for, and 7 are prisoners of war. The Iraqi government has not released information on their military losses. 4 American soldiers wounded in the war are being treated at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington this morning. They returned to the U.S. yesterday, and they are said to be in fair to satisfactory condition. We have reporters throughout the war zone to keep you informed. Coming up in the next hour, some say that President Bush has underestimated the resolve of Iraqi troops. Others say that is not the case. We are going to look at that debate just ahead. Plus, politicians of today talk about what they faced on the battlefields of history. They're going to share their emotions of having a license to kill. Plus, love and more, a Marine talking from his heart to his pregnant wife back home. Their touching story will touch your heart.
And good morning from Atlanta. I'm Anderson Cooper at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Thanks for joining us. My colleague Darren Kagan, live in Kuwait City. A lot going on, Darren, at this hour.
Yes, absolutely. I understand as we're starting off this half hour, Anderson, that we're also seeing some pictures from Ramstein airbase in Germany, the site of more injured soldiers being brought there for treatment from the battlefields of Iraq.
That's right. We are looking at those live pictures at the airbase in Germany. I'm not sure if anyone has been offloaded from the cargo plane yet. The pictures are sort of unclear. We're seeing an ambulance. I know, Darren, you can't see the pictures. We're seeing an ambulance waiting for these wounded to be offloaded. We also just moments ago got a report, started with the Associated Press, then confirmed by Tom Mantier at CENTCOM, that there has been a suicide bombing in Najaf. 5 Americans, according to the Associated Press, quoting U.S. military officer, 5 Americans killed in that suicide bombing. Perhaps not a huge surprise to military planners, given all that they have seen in the last 9 or 10 days or so. But nevertheless, this is the first report of this kind of an attack we have received. Let's go right now away from these pictures that we're showing you I'm sorry, we're going to go to Bob Franken, who is standing by at an airbase in southeastern Iraq. An airbase important both as a forward positioning place for close air support, also as a possible base for POWs who are going to be taken eventually to that base. Bob, what's the latest where you are?
They will be taken, the POWs will be taken to this base, have been taken to this base. We've seen some of them. They're immediately removed, and they're taken to points that we can't specify right now. We can tell you that there is under construction about 30 miles to the south, a camp that could be a permanent spot for them, permanent as the war would allow, but it is one that is also in question because it is fairly close to the battles, which could be a violation of the Geneva Convention. We are very close to various battle areas, except that the military has decided that security is sufficient to make this airfield a very, very important, a vital part, to use the word of the wing commander, in the effort. It will be, as you pointed out, a staging area for many of the ground support missions, particularly of the A-10s. Now, yesterday, when we arrived, there was virtually nothing here. By today, after load of equipment is coming both by convoy and by C-130, it is beginning to be a bustling airport. It is one that was left by the Iraqis 10 years ago, part of the no-fly zone. It hasn't been used as an airport. What is interesting is behind me you can see a runway that is A, in good shape, and B, very long. Somebody estimated as much as 10,000 feet. That means that just about any kind of plane ultimately will be able to fly in here once all the other facilities are intact, such things as the refueling, maintenance, and all that. There's a big effort to get that in, a big effort to get the A-10s operating from here, because, Anderson, as you know, this air base, although we can't say exactly where it is, we can say that it's 150 miles closer to just about all of the action right now than its home base, which is just a little bit north of Kuwait City. So this is where the air base is going to be a forward air base. Right now, the people who are involved in getting the A-10s up and running are getting ready for the final preparations, so the first ones can arrive and immediately go into action. Anderson?
Now, Bob, I believe you reported earlier that military personnel right now are building up some berms to actually separate the air operations part of this base from what will eventually be a place for POWs. Is that correct?
Actually, I'm talking about 2 different locations. This airport is one that's about 30 miles north of the one where the POWs are going to be set up. It's all along the same road. That one will be called Camp Buka. And yes, you're right. They are building up berms there. The berms will be to not only keep them separated, but to not allow the POWs any sight of the operations of the camp. It's a fairly obvious security measure. It's under construction now. There's a lot of activity going there. And then separate from here is the air operation, which is being established at this forward air base.
All right, Bob Franken, thanks very much. We're going to go now to Darren Kagan, who again is in Kuwait City. Darren?
Yeah, Anderson, I want to talk about what happened here overnight, almost coming up on exactly 11 hours ago. A missile, an Iraqi-fired missile, hit this city. It's about the 13th missile that the Iraqis have fired on Kuwait, aiming at Kuwait City since this war began about, some 2 weeks ago, some week and a half ago. This time, though, the missile hit, and it didn't just hit, it hit a center part of town, what they call the Shark Mall, one of the 2 main shopping malls here in Kuwait City. Again, about 1:40 a.m. in the morning. They're saying that it's a Chinese seersucker missile. It hit an area along the waterway right in front of the mall and skidded in, causing some amount of damage. Because of the time of day that this was, or time of night rather, 1:40 in the morning, not a lot of people there, only 1 person injured in this attack. We actually have some pieces of the missile and the building that we can show you here to kind of give you a feel of what it was like. 2 chunks of metal here. This from the side of the missile, you can see was painted green. And then this tile, this is a piece of the tile that was blown off the side of the mall. The significance of this, as the Iraqis have been firing missiles at Kuwait, first of all, it's the first time they were able to hit the center of town. Second of all, it's the first time that a missile's been fired that it didn't either, but wasn't shot down by a Patriot missile, and or didn't land in the desert or the sea. Also significant, the sirens did not sound in time to give the Kuwaiti people warning, and those of us here in Kuwait City warning that it could be on the way. You could say that lucky this time because of the time of day that it hit and because it wasn't in a very populated area, Anderson, for the time of day that it was. That Shark Mall is usually very, very busy at all times of day because it's, as I said, one of the main shopping malls. Also, it has attached to it a large supermarket, an additional department store that draws a lot of shoppers from this area.
Yeah, unbelievable. And Darren, as you said earlier, some 25,000 people visit that mall on any given weekend. So it is remarkable that it, I suppose, that it happened when it did. Darren Kagan, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to add, I shared this earlier, but I was one of them with part of our group here at CNN. We went to restock on some supplies late yesterday afternoon, so I was at that very mall. Looks a lot like any American mall that you would see across the U.S., not the kind of place you would get the feel that you were in any kind of danger of being hit by a missile.
Yeah, I imagine it's similar to the mall in Doha, Qatar, where I spent some time a couple of months ago, and you know, saying it's a mall, it's really an epicenter of social life for a lot of people. I imagine it's the same in Kuwait City because the weather there, people are not hanging out outside, the cities are often very stretched out, so the mall really does become a gathering place for people of all ages.
Much like it does back in the States, Anderson.
Certainly so. All right, Darren Kagan, thanks. We'll check in with you shortly. I just want to update you on what we know thus far. The big news that happened just a few moments ago. First reported Associated Press saying that a suicide bomber, this quoting a U.S. military officer, a suicide bomber killed 5 Americans in an attack in Najaf. Now, we are trying to get more details on this. I just pulled something off the AP wire. Apparently it was at some sort of a checkpoint, a military checkpoint. The attack occurred at a manned checkpoint on the highway north of Najaf. They are also quoting the Jerusalem Post on this. Apparently a taxi stopped close to the checkpoint. The driver waved for help. 5 soldiers approached the car and it exploded. This according to Captain Andrew Wallace, who told the Associated Press Television this news on Saturday. That is, of course, the first time we have heard of such an attack, although perhaps, and we're going to talk to Art Harris in a moment, who's with the Marines in Nasiriyah. I want to ask him if they have talked about this kind of eventuality, but this is a conflict where, according to CENTCOM officials and our embedded correspondents on the ground, there have been civilians, the soldiers dressed as civilians. There have been people waving white flags who suddenly break out shooting. There have been hospitals and schools that have been used as headquarters for irregular militia forces. There have been a host of surprises, you might say. This just adds to the list, I suppose. Let's check in with Art Harris. He is in or near Nasiriyah, where there has been an extraordinarily fierce fight between U.S. Marines and irregular forces in that city. Read a report earlier, one Marine telling, or at least several Marines, senior Marines telling CNN, it is the fiercest fighting the Marines have been involved in since the Vietnam War. Quite a remarkable statement to hear that. Let's check in with Art Harris. Art, what's the latest? You told us before there had been an attack by Marines early this morning. What's the latest?
Yeah, the Marines have pumped up the volume of firepower and patrols against Iraqi positions in Nasiriyah. The city on the Euphrates River that dates back to biblical times, but in recent days has seen a lot of fighting and a lot of dying. Last night, C-130 helicopter gunships, nicknamed Puff the Magic Dragon from Vietnam days, hit positions on the north side of the city. And this morning, what woke me up was a heavy barrage of U.S. artillery about 6 a.m., mortars, Harrier jets. I watched Cobra helicopter gunships move in to attack Iraqi positions on the north side of the city. Marines now occupy the north and the south side of Nasiriyah and tell me that the bridges remain open and the city is becoming increasingly secure. Infantry units this morning did encounter resistance. Some of the resistance they encountered included Iraqis with AK-47s and human shields, women and children with them. The Marines held their fire. I'm told by a senior Marine here that they are being very, very careful not to alienate the civilian population. They don't want to hurt civilians. There have been no Marine casualties from today's fighting. 2 Iraqi fighters were wounded and have been medevac for further treatment. The Marines also, Anderson, seized an Iraqi military compound. What I'm told was discovered was a treasure trove of information there. You just heard another explosion, a treasure trove of intelligence information, maps. They found chemical gear, munitions, anti-aircraft guns, and have called for demolition experts to blow those up. They have also found that every day as they move into the city, they are encountering still the same tactics you described, which is military people, military men in civilian robes. 40 to 50 evacuees told military intelligence officers that the new tactic of the paramilitary is to go house to house and recruit any male over 16 by threatening to kill a brother or sister if the family doesn't give them up. This comes from about 50 detainees or evacuees who were leaving the city yesterday. In one case, the military was told, the Iraqi paramilitary actually executed a 9-year-old boy, and they are encountering tactics that have tested the Marines' resolve. This is a fight they did not expect. It is not a familiar fight. And for many Marines, Anderson, who missed Vietnam, they're getting a taste of history revisited here. Anderson?
Yeah, Art, very briefly, I don't know if you've been able to hear, we have, the Associated Press was reporting, and U.S. Central Command has confirmed part of this story, that there was at least an incident. They haven't given details. The Associated Press is saying that there has been a suicide bomber that's killed 5 Americans in an attack north of Najaf. I'm just curious to know, the Marines you are with, has there been talk among those Marines about something like this happening, about the possibility of some sort of suicide attack, some sort of suicide car bombing at a checkpoint?
Yeah, they're very aware of this danger, Anderson. And when I was on the Euphrates with them, when my light armored reconnaissance unit was guarding a checkpoint there, a constant flow of people and cars and trucks. And one of the staff sergeants, who was not accustomed to this sort of security patrol, ordered his men to start stopping these vehicles far out of range, he hoped, of suicide bombers, and check the car, all explosives, make the people get out. And in one case, found an Iraqi with an AK-47 with women and children in the car. So this is a very difficult situation to patrol. The Marines in that case, Anderson, were dug into a fighting hole, as they call it, and those are dug around here, and they are watching for that danger.
All right, Art, you stay safe. We'll check in with you shortly. A lot of conflict going on in and around Nasiriyah at this moment. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, a far different story, a reunion of sorts made possible by this amazing technology which we have been witnessing over the last 9 or 10 days or so. We'll be right back.
Do several hundred septic system repairs a year. If your septic system fails, you're going to run into several problems. It will either back up into the yard, into the house. I would recommend you use RIDX once a month. It is cheaper to maintain your septic system, a lot cheaper.
Starry, starry night.
The American original. The American phenomenon. The American anthem.
So bye, bye, Miss American Pie.
Get the history of rock and roll in this influential music collection from America's legendary singer-songwriter, Don McLean.
Castles in the air.
After 30 years and 20 albums, we've handpicked 21 of the most beloved songs from a true American icon. Call now and get 21 legendary songs of Don McLean for $18.98 plus shipping and handling. And get this collector's poster of the original American Pie album cover free. The celebration of an unforgettable era. The collection of landmark hits. Get the legendary songs of Don McLean. Order 21 legendary songs of Don McLean and get the collector's poster for just $18.98 plus $4.95 shipping and handling. Or send check or money order to the address shown. Call now. CNN puts you alongside the troops.
We are here just behind the front line. We lead the Iraqi forces.
More reporters in the region to keep you informed. No one gets you closer than CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Over the last hour or so, we've been focusing a lot on the south and the central part of Iraq. Now we want to check in on the northern part of the country at an air base in northern Iraq. That is where U.S. forces are setting up shop, building up the Harir airfield, and that is where we find our Jane Najaf. Jane, hello.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hello, Darren. What we're seeing behind us here is an airbase rising up out of what was just a few days ago an empty airfield. Now, this is the Harir airstrip. And what you're seeing in the distance is a really interesting thing. Those yellow and red flags are the flags of the KDP, the Kurdish faction that controls this territory. They're working in cooperation with the American forces, and it's something that they've waited for a long time. Now, this airbase is rising up. Right now, we're seeing transport helicopters, some tents. There was literally nothing here a couple of days ago until the 173rd Airborne dropped in a very dramatic airdrop. Since then, they've been lifting supplies in, and pretty soon they will be airlifting other things. Now, the public affairs officer for the base, what's to become a base, Major Rob Gowan, tells us that the object here is to continue to build up those forces.
Continuing to set up, make it more livable, and just improve our fighting positions. We have mortars here, heavy machine guns, that kind of thing, just making it more robust and more defensible.
And what he means by making it more livable, a lot of it is essentially protecting themselves from the weather. Now, a lot of the guys we talked to who parachuted in were saying that they were expecting something quite a lot warmer than this, desert in fact. They ended up landing in the freezing mud, and they've been sleeping outdoors. The other challenge they're facing is communicating with Kurdish people who all are really quite overjoyed that they're here. There's a bit of a translation problem. They've recently got in more interpreters, and they drop down with translation cards, which help a little bit, but they say it'll take a while to see how things go with the local population. Darren?
Jane, what about the security risk as they go ahead and set this airfield up?
Well, they are in pretty friendly territory. This is about as friendly as it gets. We are indeed still in Iraq, but they are obviously taking the normal precautions, including sending the transport planes in at night. Now, if you come here late at night, as we have, in the middle of the night, you can see these big C-17s and C-130s landing, those huge transport planes. They will at some point be unloading tanks and armored personnel carriers, and they're doing this at night for security. It's been quite moonless, so totally dark.